Good evening and thank you for coming. So I'm going to give a speech on the National Football League. What if I told you that there was an organization that literally owned a day of the week? Well, there is, and it's called the National Football League. The NFL has a rich history which includes a lot of great players as well as a lot of great rule changes that have adapted over time. And each team competes during the season for a shot at the Super Bowl, which is considered the biggest sporting event in the U.S. And concussions are actually becoming a problem, and the NFL is still successful now, but is becoming a increasing problem, and some believe that the NFL is going to go through even more drastic changes. So as I said, the NFL is a huge organization, and was not always known as the multi-billion-dollar organization that it is today. So it was founded in Canton, Ohio, in 1920, and it was originally called the APFA, which is the American Professional Football Association, and Canton is actually where the Hall of Fame is located now today. It originally consisted of 13 teams, and there was no set number of games that they had to play at first. It was just they had a minimum number of games. As long as you met that minimum number of games in each season, that you were able to compete for the championship. It wasn't called the Super Bowl yet. So in 1933, they transitioned to becoming the NFL, and that was because of high demand from fans for the championship game. So they made the organization even bigger and continued to add teams. However, in 1960, the AFL, which is the American Football League, they became an organization, and it began to challenge the NFL for viewers. So eventually in 1966, the NFL and AFL merged to create one league. However, it was one league but still separate, because in 1967 it was the actual first Super Bowl the following season of the merger. It was the first Super Bowl, and it was just the best team from the NFL versus the best team from the AFL. So even though, again, it was still one organization, but still kind of two separate. And the Green Bay Packers ended up winning that game. So now let's take a look at how the league is organized today. So today the NFL is consisted of 32 teams across the U.S. as opposed to the original 13. And it's kind of unique from other sports such as baseball or hockey or basketball because they all have teams from Canada. But since NFL is an American sport, it is only American teams. So there's two conferences, and each conference is consisted of 4 subdivisions. So it's just the AFC and NFC conference, and each conference has the East, South, North, and West. And each team is placed in a division according to their geography. So obviously, if you're in the AFC South, you're going to be in the southern United States. So teams, as opposed to back in the day, now they have a set schedule. So it's 16 games regular season, and that's followed by the playoffs, which eventually leads to the Super Bowl. So the best team from each division will make the playoffs, and then 2 extra teams, which are called wildcard teams, so will also make the playoffs. So that was adapted to pretty much give a whole nother round. So now there's a wildcard round in the playoffs, and that just gives more revenue as well as more teams getting a shot at the Super Bowl. So the playoffs will begin with the wildcard round. So that's usually the wildcard teams playing the lowest division winner of each conference. And then it goes to the divisional round, and then eventually the conference championship, and then whoever wins each conference, the AFC and NFC, they will meet for the Super Bowl. So while the NFL has been increasingly successful, some may think that the league will not last, and that is a large part due to concussions, which have become an increasingly important issue that needs to be addressed. So cases of CTE, which is severe brain damage, are arising in retired players, and the problem with CTE is that it doesn't encourage, but will give symptoms of aggressiveness and even suicidal behavior. And the problem is that it cannot be diagnosed until you are already dead, doing like a brain cadaver. So there's no way to really figure out if you have CTE while you're living, and that is why it's so dangerous and such a large issue. And a movie was even created. It was called Concussion, and it was actually used to expose the NFL for trying to hide the fact that concussions are such a big problem. So that was kind of like the start of changes being needed to be made. So building off that, there have been a lot of significant changes to to avoid having high-speed collisions. One of them, they've eliminated helmet-to-helmet contact and have protected defenseless players. So the quarterback as well as wide receivers are more protected now. So when they're going across the field, you can't just lay them out as you used to be able to even 10, 15 years ago. And the kickoff was also moved up, which the kickers are so good nowadays, as well as moving the kickoff up. There's really no kickoff at all. It's going to increase touchbacks, which is going to pretty much get rid of the kickoff altogether without technically getting rid of it. So in conclusion, the NFL has made great strides since being founded in 1920, and the Super Bowl continues to be the biggest day in sports in the U.S., and precautionary measures are being taken, but there's no eliminating concussions from this sport. It's a rough sport, so they're going to do their best, but some people think that they're watering down the sport, and it may end up dying out, but as of now, it's still very successful. And I just want to end my presentation with a quote, and it's by the great Vince Lombardi. The Lombardi Trophy is what you get when you win the Super Bowl. And he says that winning is not everything, but making the effort to win is. And I think that that's a great quote for in sports, obviously, as well as life, because it's not about just winning, but like the effort and the path that you take to get there is just as important. So that is my speech, and thank you.